So the first thing I want to ask you, and get some volunteers to answer this question, when you think about which identifiers are important to you, so is it your race? Is it your gender? Is it your ethnicity? Is it your socioeconomic status? Which identifiers are important to you? Who would like to volunteer? Yes. Why?
I was saying,
Anybody else? Yes, ma'am. Gender and sexual orientation. So when we think about that, so we know we have the different dimensions of diversity. We talk about your social and your personal identifiers. When you think about your identity again, which of them would you consider, when you think about your identifiers, which one do you think is considered as being a privilege, and which one of them do you think might be considered as a burden? So which identifier you would consider as a privilege, and which identifier you might consider as a burden? Oh, go ahead. You go, and then you go.
my work field would be a privilege.
Mm-hmm. Can be. So tell me why. Elaborate.
Oh, I'm thinking of
Mm-hmm.
so the background
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
and it's very and legal aid and
Mm-hmm.
they're very
Mm-hmm.
and so it's a
Okay. Anybody else want to add something to it? So when we think about this, especially, we think about, you've heard the popular term intersectionality. And when we think about the interconnectedness of multiple identifiers. When we think about race, when we think about gender, and we think about class. And so when we think about that, for me, as a black woman, being black is one thing, then being a woman. So that pretty much caused multiple difficulties to me in order for me to maneuver life. So if I was a gay black woman, those are 3 barriers I would have to encounter on a daily basis because of who I am. So when we think about implicit bias, now many of you are familiar with this term because you are in the legal field. We know that when we get information, we automatically sort information automatically. Say, okay, that's a chair, that's a person. And I consider that as being fast brain. But when we think about slow brain, we're thinking about in a way in which we're actually taking consideration of looking at people holistically. We're not just looking at, this is a black person, this is a Latina, this is a Caucasian person. We're looking at that person holistically. And we know how media, how our past experiences play a major role on how we interact with people on a daily basis. A lot of times as we maneuver this life, as I say, because this can be a tough life, there are a lot of times that we encounter, we see things that confirm what we believe or what we heard of. And that's considered as confirmation bias. So if you're walking around, you'll say, okay, black people are lazy. You might see examples in the workplace and you say, oh, that confirms that. Or all Asian people are smart. You might see that in the workplace and that might confirm that. But as we know, we have to holistically look at individuals. Microaggressions. Most of us are familiar with this term. Microaggressions are everyday verbal, nonverbal, and environmental slights, snubs, or insults, whether intentional or unintentional, which communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative messages to target persons based solely upon their marginalized group membership. How many of you see that on a daily basis at your in your workplace? Not now? You want to say something, Marlon?
No.
Mm-hmm. So here are some common behaviors that you might see, and if you guys want to add on to any of these behaviors, that's fine. So like, for example, you might make the assumption, okay, you see that black lawyer. You assume that black lawyer is not an attorney. Or you might see this Latino man, and you assume he's the defendant versus the attorney. Or you might see, or a lot of times as we see these behaviors, or a lot of times we don't take in consideration of looking at, we only focus on the majority. We don't focus on the minority. And especially when you have people who are Jewish or Muslim, they're not able to bring their authentic selves to the table. People who are also homosexual, they also have difficulty in bringing themselves to the table because of their sexual orientation. They don't want to be treated unfairly because of it. Or if they dress a certain way, they don't want to be treated differently because of that just as well. One thing, as we already know, we hear it all the time, the angry black woman. Those are the behaviors or the biases that you hear on a regular basis. And women, I mean, you guys are in the legal field. You know that you're treated unfairly based on who you are. This is when I was doing my research. Women in the legal field they are pretty much held at a higher standard and compared to men. Why is that the case? You know, when we think about that, especially when we think about women of color, they're discriminated against, they're harassed, they don't have opportunities for growth, they get poor evaluations, they get different treatment, lack of access. Why is that the case in the legal field? And then secondly, for me, I know this well, since my name is Charesha, of being just how people are just discriminated against by their names. How an Ashley or Emily they consider as being more employable versus a Lakeisha or a Tamika. So when we think about our country, I tell people all the time, there is no coincidence on why things are the way they are. It's because our country is pretty much, our past is still our present. When we think about when our founding forefathers designed this country, they were white, heterosexual, Protestant men, right? Isn't that pretty much consistent today? And doesn't that have a major role on why things are the way they are today? And those are the people that are in what? Yes?
The fields that involve.
Right. They're the ones in what? So what's that word I'm looking for? Power. So we talk about the word power. Which definition do you think is applicable to the word power? Is the first, second, or third definition, you guys? How many people think it's the first definition? Second, or third? What about the word privilege? And lastly, oppression. Third. And so when we think about this, you have to think about, we talk about institutional, we talk about systemic racism. It pretty much boils down to the design of our country. And there are individuals who have been historically oppressed and who are going to continually be historically oppressed because, as we know, some people are not receptive to the new norm. And then I saw this interesting picture, but I liked it because I felt like who is dominating in power? And you can see able-bodied, heterosexual, European heritage, upper class, non-Jew, which of course I don't like to use the word Jew, I like to use the word Jewish. But these are the words when we talk about who are the people in power. Anything below the horizontal line, these are characteristics of individuals who are not in power. Female, women who cannot produce children, people who are Jewish, people who are dark skin. These are attributes that you associate with people who are not in power. So we're going to do a scenario. Do I have 3 volunteers who can be my actors and actresses? Can I have 3? 3 wonderful people. We have 2. Oh, we have my 3 people here. 1, 2, and 3. Have you guys come up. Come on. So I'm going to give you the scenarios, and you guys can decide who's going to be what. Okay. And then we're going to have everybody on the back. Got to prepare. One, two, three, action.
Of a male secretary, and I going on with that. Yeah.
If no one else has something to say, anything?
There's nothing else in here.
Well, thank you, my actors and actresses. All right, so this is the scenario, and I'll go over that in a little. I'll pass that out. It's on your flyer, no, on your handout rather. So here are some questions. Have you ever been in a similar situation in the workplace? Mm-hmm. Anyone else have been in something similar? How did you handle it? Mm-hmm.
I find that they're
Mm-hmm.
in that they come and go. That was just like the window to respond. I find that a lot of times, especially how I found personally.
Mm-hmm.
The one I want to die on.
Anybody else? So what was the outcome? If you, some of you, if you did, stand up for those individuals, what was the outcome?
It was a discussion.
But some of these are going to be redundant. Have you witnessed a coworker experience a situation similar to the one in this scenario? I'm sure most of you can agree, yes. What are other ways to engage coworkers on a daily basis to be allies? What are other things that you can do? I mean, some of you said stand up, correct, have conversations. What other things can you do? Yes, ma'am.
Sometimes forgiveness.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Mm.
As much.
Mm-hmm. True enough, I agree. Yes, ma'am.
One of them is to
I agree. I agree. So we already know when we think about an ally, it's a person that actively promotes and aspires to advance the culture of inclusion intentionally. And so that means those are people who are standing up. When they see something wrong, inappropriate, they're standing up for those individuals. So when we think of allyship, it is something that is not, it's something that's a lifelong process. It's not like I do it once and it's over. It's something that you will have to continuously do. And it's about you taking that chance and learning how to advocate for people who don't have a voice. It's also making sure that those individuals feel like they're included and they have the support that they need in order for them to be able to prosper in a personal setting and also in a professional setting. So when we think of, there are three types of allyships. First of all, when we think about self-interest, I'm going to focus on advocating for those individuals that I care about. The other one is where we talk about altruism, is where we're talking about how I'm going to advocate for them. But social justice, I'm advocating for myself, for people I care about, and everybody else, which is the way that we're really kind of moving toward in the society. So, these are ways that you can be an ally. You can become a sponsor, become a mentor, call out inappropriate behavior. I think that's something that many of us have already stated. Use your position to have an impact. You know, so for example, I'm not calling out Marlon, but like as an African-American lawyer, you know, so people can see what is attainable, or just using your position in order to influence change. Respect the pronoun. You know, like you said, we talked about Caitlyn Jenner. You know, a lot of times people are not receptive to the new norm. How do you make sure that those people feel like they're included? Making sure you use inclusive language in your, where it could be in your forms or in your literature, make sure you do that. Making sure that you seek honest feedback from underrepresented individuals. So as all of you work in law firms, you want to make sure that your clients have a voice. A lot of times, underrepresented individuals don't feel like their voices are being heard. We want to make sure that their voices are being heard. Lastly, get accustomed to being uncomfortable. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. In life, you got to take chances. And you have to know that as this morning, before, when I was preparing for this, I was watching Martin Luther King's children, and they were like, and the interviewer, she asked Yolanda, the youngest one, well, did you think that your father's life had to be sacrificed in order for our world to be better? And she said, yes. And I was surprised by the answer, but she actually said yes. He had to die in order for change to happen. So I always believe in the power of one. The colorblind approach, I don't see color. That means that you're not looking at those individuals holistically. You have to take in consideration, as a former teacher, one of the things I've noticed, like children live, some of the students who attend Solon schools, Beechwood, if I ask some of those Caucasian students, I'm like, well, what is your ethnicity? They don't know. It's like all of them end up becoming just white. And so we have to take and consider people of their ethnicity, their race, people's race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation. All those factors have to be taken into consideration. Be a lifelong learner. In this process called life, you're going to always learn something new. And just be willing to learn from one another. Understand your position and how you can use your position to impact change. If you ask, so for example, there are things like, for example, I use the word Jew and Jewish. And for me, a couple years ago, I would say, there's nothing wrong with me using the word Jew. But a lot of times we have conversations with Jewish people, they said it's offensive. So just making sure that you ask those clarifying questions. And remember, you don't need to get credit for doing this work. You don't. We're all part of this process. As we see how divisive our country is, we have to figure out how we can be part of the solution and not part of the problem. Are there any other things that you would like to add onto the list on how to be an ally?
Sometimes it's about giving. I've been in situations like
So I had some handouts where we talked about, an action plan. So think about something that you might want to start implementing at your law firm. Maybe you want to focus on trying to make sure you create an inclusive environment, for those individuals who may be Jewish, where they have a voice, or people, as we know, with all the stuff that's going on in our country, for the people for the Muslims. Think about what you are passionate about. And so I have a little action plan, where I have some guiding questions. And then I've got on the bottom, it says the actions that you need. Think about who will be responsible to ensuring that those actions are implemented. The timeline, when should each task be completed? Think about any resources that you need in order to ensure that you meet the targeted goal. Any barriers that you might foresee. And how do you know that you were successful? So I'll pass these out to you. Are there any questions? Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say that you just have to get out.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember about being, and so what I'm thinking about is being an ally, is to be part of the underground to get that.
You're welcome. And like I said, we know it's not just a one thing. There are multiple things you can do. I think things that you can do in order to try to assist someone. It's just, I think the biggest thing for us is try to figure out, just don't live this world, exist in this world without trying to help others. I think that's the biggest thing, ultimately. And so we all have a purpose, and we have to figure out how we can utilize, or how we can fulfill our true meaning of existence. And that's something I'm very passionate about. All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you.